Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. Cody and I are excited to be here today to talk to you about setting and reaching your goals inside of your business. Hey, Cody, welcome back.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for asking. How about you?
I'm doing just dandy.
Oh,
it's a good day.
That's good. It's a good day to be a good day, right?
Right.
Love it. Love it. So, goal setting is one of those things that I kind of go at backwards. And so I'm actually really excited to hear you talk a little bit today about how you set and achieve the goals that you have set out for your financial business. So go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the whole topic of goal setting, I feel like it's a topic that's very overplayed, because everyone talks about setting goals and all that jazz, and that's cool to set the goals, but then do you actually achieve the goals or reach the goals? It's like, okay, yes or no. And it's also something to where it's like, well, I know I need to have goals and all that kind of jazz. But the key that I think about between or going beyond just setting the goals is actually achieving them. And, when I first started my practice, I definitely had goals, but they were not very specific. Mm-hmm. They were not measurable. They were just like, I want to be able to do this. Mm-hmm. And that worked okay for a little bit. It got me off the ground, but it wasn't until I actually got very specific, I got very measurable, and I held myself accountable through doing that things actually really started to blossom and pick up a lot of traction.
Okay.
So that's what I want to talk about today is essentially well, how do we even do that? And again, it might seem very a very basic topic, but I feel that this is a topic that does get kind of overlooked. Mm-hmm. Quite a bit
because it's over talked about. Yeah, it's one of those catch-22s, right? Like something that's over talked about, and then people are like, I've heard that before, and so that's why it becomes overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's almost like you're trying to lose weight, and people are like, "Well, you gotta eat well." It's like, yeah. I know I gotta eat well.
Right. What else can I do instead?
Right.
Exactly. So let me ask you this: you said that it was pretty recent that you started doing that. Could you give us a time frame as to when you started doing this, so we can kind of put that in context?
Yeah, I started making a shift back in October, so about 6 months ago.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah,
cool.
So the biggest shift for me was actually writing it down. Mm.
Mm-hmm. I think I've heard a goal not written is merely a wish. I think that's a quote that I've heard. I just don't know who to give credit for that.
Yeah. And, beforehand, I didn't write it down. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't write it down. And because I didn't write it down, I didn't have a way to break it down.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's a golden nugget, you guys.
Mm-hmm. I'll say it again.
Go for it.
Because I didn't write it down, I didn't have a way to break it down.
Love that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what I did back in October was I went to Walmart and I bought myself a $15 whiteboard. And I just wrote everything down. And for me, I took that whiteboard. It wasn't like a huge whiteboard. It's probably, I'm looking at it right now, it's probably 20 inches high and 2.5 feet long. Okay. It's not anything huge. Mm-hmm. But I broke it down to, okay, I have a yearly goal. So let's just for a nice round number, let's say that you want to have a 6-figure business. Okay. $100,000.
Oh, good. We're using zeros because last week I had needed a calculator. Now I feel like this week we're going to be
right. Right.
Okay. $100,000 then. Perfect.
Yep. So let's say that's your goal, whether it be for 2022 or 2023, whatever. That's your goal, $100,000. Cool. Let's break it down a little bit. How about a quarterly goal? Well, if it's $100,000 for the year, that means every quarter you want to hit $25,000 of revenue. That's a really good place to start. And you're like, all right, cool. So what kind of offers do you have for your coaching packages, or the way that you set up people actually like paying you for your services? So for me personally, I have two different levels of coaching packages that I do. So I'm like, okay, I can either do, 8 of these at this price, and that will get me to $25,000 in a quarter, or I can do 5 of these at that price, and that will get me to $25,000 a quarter as well. So I basically broke it down to, okay, I need to either get 8 clients in one category or 5 clients in the other category, or a mixture of the two that gets me to that point, right?
Yep.
So one of the things that I do on my whiteboard is I write down the goal. So it's 25,000 received income by April 1st, for example, because that's the first quarter. And then I also write down how many I need to sell for each package. So let's use the 8 for one package, or 5 for another package, or a mixture of the two. Then from there, what I like to do is I like to put little boxes, and I put 8 boxes. So I kind of overshot a little bit. So I put 8 boxes, and I put hearts inside each box. And every time that I sign a new client to where I'm like, okay, cool, like this person's moving forward, I then fill in that heart and I write their name on top of the box along with which option they took. And that's just my way of telling myself, like, hey, this is a person's life, or this is a person's life that I'm being a part of to help them change. I'm touching their hearts, kind of thing. That's just my way of doing it. It's a visual representation, and it's cool to see those hearts get filled in, So that's one side of it. Then I also have like the old fashioned like thermometer kind of thing, where it's like, after every month, I kind of fill that in, or, you could do it every time you get paid if you want, but I just do it every month, to where it's like, okay, cool. Like this month I made, $8,000. So I fill it up to 8,000, and I can kind of see how much I have left to go. So that's another thing that I do. That's again, another visual representation. But then the last thing that I do that I think is really critical is I actually map out how many consultations I need to make.
And you base that number on what?
So I overshoot just because, again, that's my style. I like to put pressure on myself, like we discussed in that last episode. So I tell myself that my closing rate is only going to be 25%, which it's higher than that, but I tell myself it's 25%. So that means that if I want to land 8 new clients in this quarter, I need to book 8 times 4 would be 32 calls, 32 consultations in 3 months, which so then I take that and I'm like, okay, well, how much is that a week? It's 3 consultations a week. And every time that I have a consultation, much like those hearts, I just fill in the box for the consultations. And that tells me, okay, and I have it for every week. So one week is 3, the other week is 3, the other week is 3. And that tells me if I'm staying consistent enough with my action and my promoting and my outreach and my communication to actually get those calls booked or not. So perfect example is right now, I'm looking at my whiteboard and I'm actually 1 consultation behind currently. By the end of the week, I'll be right back up to pace. Nice. But right now I'm behind, and I saw that and I'm like, oh shoot, like I'm behind.
Time to get a consultation.
I need to push a little bit more.
Right.
And that's why I'm going to actually get caught back up by the end of this week, is because I saw that it was a visual representation, and then I applied myself and I got consistent with it and got the results that I needed. So that's how I break my goals down. It's not just like one goal of like, well, I just want to make 100,000. There's several different moving parts to it. It's the income side of it. It's the amount of clients that I'm signing. It's the amount of calls that I'm making. And then, there's also things like having a content calendar and stuff like that, to where you can be more consistent with like your marketing and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole other discussion, but it's part of it.
No, I love all of the visual representations that you have. Inquiring minds want to know, up until the point where you were talking about the number of consultations that you need each week, I was envisioning a whiteboard that stayed basically intact for the entirety of the year. Is that how your whiteboard works? Like, did you have, the $100,000 listed at the top, and then, all of the squares and the hearts and stuff? Or do you do you erase it every month and say this is the monthly goal? Or do you erase it every week? That's what made me start thinking about it when you said that you have, you need 3 consultations every week or 30 every quarter. That would become a very, very convoluted board if you weren't erasing stuff, or I'm just envisioning it incorrectly. So I just want a little bit of clarification on that, if I may.
It's all about how you want to set your goals, I guess. I think that the more consistent that you are, the better. But I think that there's also some danger in that too. So if you were to do this whiteboard thing and you were to do it on like a weekly basis, I don't think that gives you a big enough picture.
I agree. I do. I totally agree. So I'm just curious how you do it, because you mentioned it's only like a, 2.5 by 1.5 foot whiteboard. And so I'm just trying to figure out, maybe it's because I have horrible eyes and I would need to write really big. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how it all fits on there. That's all.
Yeah.
Do you have an example? I mean, I know you're looking at yours, and I certainly don't expect you to share all of that. But sometime I think it would be really cool if you, I don't know, maybe in the Facebook group, if we could do like an example of what one would look like, so someone could kind of see. Do you do it you don't do it every week? Do you do it every month? Do you erase it ever? Or is it like you set it up for the year?
No, I do it every quarter.
Every quarter. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I could see that fitting on there. Cool.
Yeah,
okay.
That's the quarter for me works because it's a big enough picture for me to not have to erase it all the time and create all that extra work. I
agree. In my mind, I'm like, are there magnets that we could create that we could just throw up on there so we're not having that's my creativity went over there. Yeah. So anyway.
But it's also not such a big amount of time, like doing it
for the whole year,
semi-annually or the whole year, to where I can break it down. Like with those calls, with those consultations, there's enough room in here to where I can break it down and be like, okay, cool. Like I can make 12 weeks columns and then, three boxes per column, and it takes up a very small portion of my board. But if it was a whole year, that would just look so overwhelming.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. And so I thank you for allowing me to ask some of these probing questions. It's actually a huge compliment that I'm asking them, because it means that I love the idea that you're presenting. I could absolutely see myself implementing said idea. And so I'm thinking about where can I go and get a whiteboard? But then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to jump into that and then not really understand what he's doing with it or how he's doing it, because of all of those nuances that we just talked about. It could be overwhelming. Trying to keep up with it would be just one more thing that I would, fail at. And so I'm trying to make sure that I don't set myself up for failure. And so those of you who are listening, you just got a nice little peek into my inner mind and know why I'm asking Cody the questions that I'm asking him. So I'd love to see an actual example of it sometime. And I just think it's something that's really, really cool. I also love that you have different representations. So, the thermometer, which I love the thermometer concept. I always joke that I always have to print one off on a computer because anytime I try to draw one, it turns out looking a little phallic, and I'm just going to use that word. And so I'm like, I just have a hard time like filling that in. So I always print one off on a computer, but I really like having a visual representation. And it came to me when we were working our own journey. And I was the one who was in the books all the time. And I was seeing progress with numbers, and I was seeing some accounts grow and some accounts, shrink, like the debt accounts shrink. And my husband, though, was just like, I feel like we're just spinning our wheels and not ever getting anywhere. And, but he had zero interest in looking at the actual accounts and the numbers and all of that. And so in true Maria fashion, I just leaned in on that. And instead of trying to force him to go and look, I thought, well, what if I just create this representation of our progress visually and put it somewhere that he's going to see every day? Don't tell him I'm doing it. That for him, I'm actually just pretending like it's some other weird thing I'm doing for myself. And so I printed one of those thermometers, and I just started filling in. I had two. One was, debt that was going down, and one was in savings that was going up. And I just put them on the refrigerator because, he eats every day. And of course, one day, and he didn't know I was doing it for him, but it took a few months, but he came and he's like, I noticed we're really making some progress on that. And it was just one of those aha moments where it's like, you know what, everyone can get excited about progress if they can see it, but sometimes we have to be careful about how we present that progress. And so I really appreciate that you do that in more than one way, whether I know it's not for your wife, it's actually for you, but I just love that it's touching different parts of your brain. The whiteboard is more logical. The thermometer is definitely more emotional and more creative and more artistic, I think. So
it's all about the visual aspect of it. Like, there's just something about getting out of your head and like actually seeing it. And then it's not even just the visual, because like you could put this into a program or a spreadsheet or something like that, like electronically. But then there's also this satisfaction of picking up a marker and coloring in that heart.
Isn't that hilarious that those little things are super satisfying?
Yeah. And actually, I'll go ahead and just show you my thing, because I don't have I haven't actually like input my income yet because we're still in April. Okay. So I also don't.
I mean, the client names are they pretty generalized? Okay.
You can't read it.
Okay. Well, I know I can't.
And something else that I'll say too, is that, well, actually, I'll just show you. So let's see here.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yep. So
you didn't even have to print it. Good job. Yours looks a little less phallic than mine would have.
Yep. So there's my goal, and my goal is $100,000. So,
okay.
Just to be transparent with you.
Okay.
But that's my goal up at the top. Says, 25,000 by July 1st. I'm currently in the second quarter. That's my 8 packages, my 5 packages. Those are my hearts. I've signed 2 clients so far this month. So that's great. I'm also working on a group program too. And I wanted 5 people to start that. So I have 4 so far.
Cool. Very cool.
Here's my calls. You can see how it's like every week.
Yep. So it's every week is up and down. It's vertically there.
Yes.
And because so is that each month then across? No.
It's this right here going across.
Okay. Oh yeah. So those are the weeks there, and you just needed 3 a week. So that's why there's 3 down. Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
And there's a thermometer, and I might fill it up and I'll put like the balance like right here next to it.
Okay.
And I'll like color it in.
Right.
Where it's at. And then I have like a little like reminder here for me, and that says 2 things. There's 2 little reminders. One says fear or flow, which to me is very important because I find myself going back and forth between those 2 things of like fear, like it's basically like a choice. You can either be fearful of what happens, or you can be in a good flow and make things happen. So that helps me. It's a nice little reminder. And I also have a little note that says, You'll never go the distance down the path of least resistance.
I knew it was coming. Love it. Yep. Love it. So for those of you who are avid listeners only on the audio version of this, I do encourage you to go find this podcast on YouTube. I think it's also on Rumble, and I don't know, it might be somewhere else, but for sure YouTube and Rumble. I encourage you to go find this there so you can see the board that Cody so graciously just shared with me, because it really does help to understand, like, oh, that's how he has it all set up on that one little board. And you're right, it's not a super large board, so it obviously is very, very possible. One other thing that I'm going to just throw in there is that I'm a bit of a nerd in a lot of ways, but we're just talking about different ways of using or having your goals kind of in front of your face. And one of my favorite ways to do that isn't necessarily visual, but it is just a reminder, is I will actually use my goals as passwords. So like if I had a business line or whatever that I needed to have as a password, if we were using this particular goal, for example, I might make that password $100 capital K lowercase in 2022. So that for those of you who weren't really paying close attention, it was $100,000 in 2022. And the reason for that is because if I forget, like if I'm away from some of this and I'm like, oh, I want to log in, why am I doing this thing in the first place? You know, if I'm, trying to do something in LinkedIn, like why am I on LinkedIn? Is it for the social stuff or is it to grow my business? And if the answer is to grow my business, what goal have I set for my business? And if it's $100,000 in 2022, that would be my password. So it's I have fun with some of that stuff. Like I have a personal podcast as well. And so just for fun, I don't typically set goals for downloads, but I like to track them. And then I might put, a certain number of downloads as my password. It's a little easier to remember sometimes because they're always making you change stuff. And B, it's just another silly way to have that goal right front and center with what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to add that in there. And it's
creative too. I don't think I've ever heard that.
Oh, really?
I've heard of people writing their goals down. I've heard of people doing a whiteboard, but I've never heard of someone putting their goals as a password.
Yeah.
That's pretty creative. Yeah. I like it.
That's one of my jams, is finding creative ways to do regular things. So, but yeah, that's just been kind of fun. It negates the whole process if you just say save password and then you use your thumbprint every time you try to get in something. Right. Then you're not remembering what that password is. But it is really fun to just come up with something that's a goal for yours, and then find creative ways to make it a strong password, as they say. So, so thanks for letting me throw that in there. Cody, this has been really, really enlightening. I love that you identified even just 6 months ago that this was a process that you wanted to really focus in on. And by process, I mean like identifying, I have this goal, but what can I do? What process can I put in place that allows me to keep that front and center, to have not just tracking it, but to be intentional with the actions that have to happen in order for that tracking to happen. And so I really, really like that. I also, the last thing I'll throw in there is I started by saying that I kind of go at goal setting a little bit backwards. And you've touched on all of the things that I typically do. We've talked on this show before about, starting with who you want to be. And in this case, like, you are wanting to be a strong provider for your family, and you have quantified that by saying, I want to be a 6-figure earner in my business. And then you said, what does that look like? Like someone who's a 6-figure earner in their business, what are some of the things that they do? What are some of the thoughts that they have? What are some of their emotions around what they're working on? And you put those into place. And then I talk about just tracking your results and measuring those results, and not necessarily setting the goal for the result, but being able to track it, because that stuff automatically happens. I think the only difference is that you did use an actual number in the beginning, like this is the numerical goal for yourself. But I also, I love how you still went at it in a way where it was like you had to break it down to see what are some of those things that person's doing. So for those of you who are listening today, whether you start with who you are or you start at what you're wanting to achieve. I want you to make sure that you hear the biggest thing in there is being able to break that down and identify the specific things that you would do or that type of person would do in order to get the results that they are hoping for. Because that was one of my biggest takeaways. And also just to be able to set it up in a way where you're going to see it and that it makes sense and it keeps you on track.
Mm-hmm. It was a huge shift for me, mentally, even with the results, like since I started doing this, my business has doubled.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's as simple as that. It's like once I wrote it down and I was able to break it down, like things just started happening because I was holding myself accountable and I had a vision.
Well, not only that, you knew what you needed to work on that day.
Yeah. Yep.
I think sometimes if we have this giant, even if it's not a giant goal, but it's a very generalized goal. If we wake up and we're like, okay, yeah, but what do I do? What do I need to do to even get to that today? Then we're kind of left flailing and we're always busy, but we're never actually productive. And that was one of the biggest shifts for you.
Yes. Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much for being willing to share all of that with us today.
Oh, yeah. I always like to be transparent.
I do. And that's what I love so much about doing this with you is you're able to do that. And like I said, if you have not seen us at all, feel free to jump on YouTube. I like to listen to my content more than I like to watch it. So you might not have even known that we have this on YouTube and Rumble. But I do encourage you, if you've never done it before, jump on this one, go fast forward to whatever timestamp we were in. Was it somewhere in the middle? Probably about 10 or 15 minutes. And just see the board that he shared with us because it really helps to put things into perspective.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. Again, we mentioned it a couple times, but we do have that Facebook group, New Money Habits Financial Coaches. Would love to see you there. That's honestly how we get a lot of our content that we like to talk about on this podcast. So weigh in, let us know what you want us to talk about. And, who knows, we might just talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. We might even have you on the show to talk about it with us. Well, who knows? You guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope you have a great rest of your week and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our host by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching. Music provided by Summer School.